Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am here about a month and a half late to do the mid-year book Freakout Tag. I know I'm late, I know it's already August, but this is one of my absolute favorite videos to do every year. It's also one of my favorite videos to watch other people do, so even though I'm a little bit behind on things, I could not pass up doing this tag this year. I do it every single year. It would feel wrong to not do the mid-year book Freakout Tag. The original creators of this tag will be linked down in the description below. This is a video I love to do, so I hope you are excited to watch it. Yes, I'm a little bit behind, but I think at this point we can all acknowledge that I'm always a little bit behind. So thank you so much for bearing with me. And before we get into the questions, these questions that are going to be covering all of the books that I read in the first half of the year, favorites, least favorites, surprises, disappointments, new favorite authors, before we jump into all of that, I wanted to mention that this video is being sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is, of course, an online learning platform with thousands of classes in just about every subject you can think of. I have been recommending Skillshare classes for over a year on my channel. It's a company I really support and a company that I hope you really support. And today, in honor of the fact that I am running a little bit late, and in fact I'm always running a little bit late, I wanted to recommend a class called Productivity Today, Managing Attention in the Digital Age by Kevin Siskar. This is a great class for learning how to focus, learning how to manage your expectations and manage your day, and productivity is something that I've been working on a lot over the last couple of years. It's something that I've really been trying to focus on, so I would really recommend this class or one of Skillshare's many other classes about productivity and time management. Premium membership to Skillshare gives you unlimited access to all of these classes, and that premium membership works out to be less than $10 a month. Plus, the first 1,000 people who click the link in my description are going to get their first 2 months of Skillshare Premium absolutely for free. So please be sure to go check out Skillshare, link will be in the description below. Go get started, go learn something new. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into these mid-year book Freakout Tag questions. Every year I'm surprised by how quickly we start off on this book tag, because question number 1 is, what is the best book that you've read so far in 2020? Like, right off the bat, I have to choose a best book? Impossible. I don't know that I've ever done it, so we're talking about 2 books. The first book that is one of my favorite books that I've read so far is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I talked about this in my 10 and 10 video about queer adults, and the fact that I loved this book so much that I immediately loaned it out to 2 friends to read, which is why I don't have my copy here. Even though I love my copy and it's signed by Hank and everything, like, I had to get this in other people's hands. What I wanted to talk about with this book, I think, is also somewhat similar to what I wanted to talk about with my other favorite book, and that is Real Life by Brandon Taylor. I think something that these books share that really made an impact on me is that these are both books about people who are close to my age. If you are a regular to the conversation about age groups and age groups that are written about in books, I'm sure you will not be surprised to hear that it can be somewhat difficult to read books about characters in their 20s. It's just not a time period that's written about as much, and something that Real Life and An Absolutely Remarkable Thing have in common is that they are both about people in their 20s. April from An Absolutely Remarkable Thing has recently gotten an art degree, so she's in her early 20s, pretty close to my age. I think she's 23. And Real Life is about a character who is getting his graduate degree in biochemistry, so mid to late 20s. And that's pretty much where the similarities between these books end. This is a realistic book about racism, sexism, homophobia within the academic community and within this small town, and An Absolutely Remarkable Thing is about a possible alien invasion, and overall being kind of a mess who is thrust into popularity. But both of these books really explored a time period, a moment in people's lives that I'm really invested in because it's a moment that I see myself in right now. The other remarkable thing is that these are both debuts, which is absolutely wild to me because they're both fantastically written. So these are definitely my 2 favorite books that I have read so far in 2020. Question number 2 is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2020? I feel like I have such an easy time with this question every year because every year by the midpoint of the year I've usually read about 1 sequel. That's true again. I read Check Please, Book 2, Sticks and Scones by Ngozi Ukazu, but just like years previous, this definitely would have been my favorite sequel, regardless of if I had read more. If you want to hear more about Check Please, go check out my June wrap-up, my Pride wrap-up. I will talk about this book more. This is the concluding part of Check Please, which has been my fave, near and dear to my heart for a few years now, and this was the perfect conclusion to Eric Biddle's story. I cried, I laughed, I hugged it to my chest. It was the absolute best, and I did not mean to rhyme that. I think other than this, I've only read companion novels, which sometimes count, sometimes don't count as sequels, but it doesn't matter. Nothing comes close to Check Please. Next up, question number 3 is to talk about a new release that you haven't read yet, but you really want to. I have, you're not gonna believe this, 2 answers. So I've got a January release and a June release. So I guess it depends on what your definition of new release is. Does a January release still count? I think so. I still think that's a pretty new release. So the 2 books that were released in 2020 that are like at the top of my must-read list are Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire. This is on the list because the Wayward Children series is one of my favorite series of all time, and this is following one of my favorite characters in that series. I can't believe I haven't read it yet. And the June release that I haven't read yet is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is on the list because my entire channel is about FF books. This is one of the biggest FF releases of the year, and I know I'm going to love it, so I kind of can't believe I haven't read it yet. It's mostly because we hit a wall in June. By we, I mean I. I hit a wall in June, and I was supposed to read this and a bunch of other books, and I didn't get to them, but I really want to get to them before the end of the year. That goes for both of these. I know that they are both going to be super highly rated books that I'm so glad that I will have read. I've just got to read them. Question number 4 is, what is your most anticipated release for the rest of the year? I am so excited for this release that I don't even have a second book. I'm just going to talk about one book, which is wild, and that book is Darius the Great Deserves Better by Adib Khorram. This is the sequel to Darius the Great Is Not Okay, which was my absolute, fave contemporary that I read in 2018. It kind of single-handedly saved my mental health, and it saved me from the spiral I was in, so I have so much love for this book. It is about a fat biracial Persian kid who is dealing with depression, and then he finds out that his grandfather is ill. And so him and his family go to Iran to visit his grandfather, and Darius starts to discover more things about himself, to explore his relationship to his dad, which he only understands in the context of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Like, so much of his relationship with his white father, who is also depressed, is based in Star Trek. This is about sibling relationships, the beginnings of queer realization, queer identity, and Darius the Great Deserves Better is going to make me cry, guaranteed. Guaranteed! Because this made me sob, and this, I'm already ready for it to be my new favorite of the year. Look out, it's probably gonna happen. Question number 5 is, what has been your biggest disappointment of the year so far? I think for this, I am going to have to go with The Love and Lies of Roxana Ali by Sabina Khan. I was so excited for this book. I have been excited about it since it was released at the beginning of 2019. I have been psyching myself up to read it, and then this wound up being just something that caused me a lot of anger overall, and not in ways that I think this book wanted to cause anger. I talk about this book, including spoilers, in my June wrap-up if you want to check that out. Basically, my biggest issue with this book is that it felt like a queer book written by straight people for other straight people, which is one of my biggest frustrations when it comes to queer lit, is that moment when I can tell that this is going to be a book about queer pain, where the point of the story is, let's have the queer person forgive all of the straight people that were horrible to her. And not in a way that is healthy or good for anybody involved. I was really psyched about this book, but it was terrible to read. I complained reading the entire time. I had a lot of issues with this book. Definitely, easily my most disappointing read of the year. Question number 6 is, what has been your biggest surprise of the year so far? Okay, don't worry, I'm back with 2 answers. The first answer is Big Little Lies. This was a huge shock. I think because I was expecting to be super middling. This is very commercial fiction, commercial mystery. It's about rich white women, which I've said in the past I've been pretty uninterested in reading about. And then this completely captured me. It was such a well-written mystery. It handled all of these different points of view so incredibly well, and since reading it, I watched the first season of Big Little Lies, the HBO series, and it's one of my favorite adaptations that I've ever seen. It is so faithful and so honest about what this book is and what it was trying to do, and because of that, I have no interest in watching the second season. My sister watched it for me and said I made the right choice, so I'm gonna go with that. This was a 4.5-star read, and I can't believe it was. I really didn't expect it to be. And the other book that I wanted to mention is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a surprise to me because it is entirely high fantasy about war and preparations for war, and I don't care about war stories. I don't care about war movies. I don't super care about war in books. It's just something where my eyes glaze over. I don't care about it. And I listened to The Poppy War on like a cross-country drive, and I am so glad that I did. Not only was it engaging in every one of the battle sequences, but it's one of the most interesting books as far as character development that I have ever read. It's not afraid to make terrifying decisions. It's not afraid to put you in this corner of moral ambiguity. And I did talk about this in my June and May wrap-up, and I said it was the only book I read that wasn't queer, but apparently I was wrong about that. Apparently the author has confirmed that Rin, the main character, is bisexual. I've gone on such a journey with knowing whether or not there was queer rep in this series, because I originally put it on my top 20 queer TBR a couple of years ago, and then I took it off because I thought it wasn't queer. I did all of this research and wasn't able to determine anywhere if it had a queer main character, so I replaced it and then talked about it as being not a queer book, and that's when people came forward and they were like, oh, it is queer. So that's a me thing. Maybe it's discussed more in book 2. I missed it. I'm sorry about that. Apparently Rin is bisexual. It was a deeply fascinating book about, like, big horrible decisions, but also about colorism and sexism. It's about magic and war. I don't know. There was a ton going on here. Most of it didn't sound like something I would traditionally love, and then I wound up absolutely loving it, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series. Question number 7 is, who is your favorite new author? And that can be someone who is just new to you, or someone who is a debut in 2020. I am going to do what I always do for this question, which is to talk about one new to me author who I really loved, and one debut author who is a new favorite. So my favorite new author who was a debut in 2020 is Brandon Taylor. I talked about Real Life. This is one of the most accomplished, well-written books that I've ever read in my life, and I was constantly dumbfounded by the fact that this is a debut novel, because it is already up for some major awards this year, and I'm feeling pretty confident it's going to win them. I can't believe the amount of power. I can't believe how quickly this book made me cry. It's just, I can't wait to read everything else that Brandon Taylor writes. It's a remarkable debut. And my favorite new author who is a new to me author has to be Katrina Leno. I loved this book. It's wonderful. It's exactly within, like, my brand of weird fabulism, magic with an FF romance. Like, queer fabulism is my niche. It's what I live for, and that's what this is. It is absolutely Gilmore Girls meets practical magic, while it's also dealing with some more intense subjects as well, so please look into trigger warnings for this. It's beautiful and definitely has some lighthearted moments, but is overall a much more down kind of book. But Katrina Leno captured me. I knew from page 1 that this was going to be one of my new favorite books of all time. As soon as I read the first page, as soon as I read the first chapter, I set it down, and I was telling my roommate, like, sometimes you just know. You read the beginning of a book and you know, and that was my experience with this. I can't wait to read all of Katrina Leno's other books. There are a bunch of them, so I'm going to be reading them. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush. I never answer this question. I always adjust this to be, like, person I most want to be best friends with at this point, because usually the characters that I'm talking about are under the age of 18, and it feels kind of weird. I'm 25. This time, my answer is still someone who I would most like to be friends with, but honestly, I did have kind of a crush on her too, and that is April from An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. She's a mess. She's a funny millennial, and I relate to both of those things, which is why I think we would get along. Whether that's as friends or romantic partners, I mean, you know, up to the universe. I love April. I think she's great. I would love to be her friend, but also I definitely had a crush on her, I'll be honest. I would also really love to be friends, I'll be honest, with Georgina. She has that disaster lesbian energy that I aspire to and that I relate to, so, you know. Me and the girls out on the town having fun. April, Georgina, and me just talking about how we're fucking messes who like girls. Question number 9 is, who is your new, like, favorite character? Who is a new favorite character of all time? That is so easy. The answer is Rin from the Poppy War. Oh my god, this is exactly what I have been talking about. I talk so much about wanting to read books that are about angry women, that are about characters who make bad decisions or who are forced into a corner where every decision they make is going to be a bad decision. I'm fascinated by books about complex morality and those life or death things that completely change how characters interact with one another. I love a huge character arc that goes exactly where it is meant to go, even if it completely blindsides me. Rin. She's the pinnacle. She is wonderful. Oh my god. Like, she's a mess who has made some very bad decisions, but on the other hand, we stan. So, I love Rin. I would love to be friends with Rin. I would love to hang out with Rin, but we would not get along at all. And I respect that. I respect that I'm way too much of a introvert who is bad at decisions, and I think that Rin is way too cool to be my friend. So, she's just one of my favorite characters instead. Question 10 is, what is a book that made you cry? Everything that I rated 5 stars has, in all likelihood, made me cry. That's usually how it goes. That's kind of how a book gets a 5-star from me, is if it makes me cry and it makes me laugh. Like, if it gets that full range of emotions, that's how a 5-star book happens. So I cried reading An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, Real Life, The Poppy War. I cried reading Check Please and Summer of Salt. I guess 2 books that made me cry that I haven't talked about yet would be The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James by Ashley Herring Blake and Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender. So we have a middle grade book and we have a YA book, and both of these made me cry because they are about messy queer experiences and family relationships, and they are wholesome and necessary, and I loved them. So yeah, these 2 made me cry. They were also both 5-star books that I haven't talked about yet in this video, but that I completely loved when I read them. Question number 11 is, what is a book that made you happy? Again, this is something that applies to a ton of books that I've read. All of my 5-star reads made me super happy. But one book that made me super happy I haven't talked about yet would be This Is What It Feels Like by Rebecca Barrow. This is a YA contemporary about 3 girls who used to be in a band together and are thinking about being a band again. And even though it deals with so much tough stuff, this is, at its heart, a joyful book about girls growing older and learning to be friends with each other again, even though they are completely different people. And it's like a summer romance on top of being like a Battle of the Bands thing. It just made me so joyful that a book like this even existed. And it's one of my new favorite summer reads. If you are looking for like a perfect summer read, get you through the end of the summer, transition into autumn, please read This Is What It Feels Like. It's so delightful. Question number 12 is, what is the most beautiful book or books that you bought or received this year? One of those is definitely Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I bought this a little while ago, and it's beautiful on the cover with these girls. It has a beautiful, beautiful spine, but it's also on this list because this is what it looks like under the cover, which is also gorgeous. There's that, and then that on the back? Oh my god! So this is easily the prettiest new release that I've bought, but I did also want to show off one other thing. I really wanted to show off these new editions of the Inkheart books. I have been posting pictures of these on my Instagram because I love them. They are new UK editions and I bought them on Book Depository. I love this series. I grew up with this series. I've read it so many times. And every single one of these has a cool illustrated cover that goes along with what is on the inside of the book. Obviously, I think that the color schemes are gorgeous. I think that they look beautiful together. I love them. I think they're some of the most beautiful books I've ever purchased, not even just in 2020. And finally, question 13 is, what books do you need to read before the end of the year? So for this, I could say like everything on my top 10 to read in 2020 list that I did earlier this year, but I don't know if I'm gonna get to all of those. It's another one of those years. The one book that's on that list that I really genuinely like want to read by the end of this year, and I think I will read by the end of the year, is Picture Us in the Light. This is by Kelly Lloyd Gilbert, and it is queer YA about mental health, secrets within a family. The main character is Chinese American and dealing with some stuff that went down about a year ago in his friend group and some secrets that he didn't know his family had. This has been on my list because so many people who have read it adore it, and it's one of the darlings of like under the radar YA books. So really want to read this before the end of the year. The other one that I really want to read before the end of the year is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is V.E. Schwab's newest book. She's been talking about writing it online for years, and I currently have the e-arc of this book, and I can't wait to read it. I have to read it before the end of the year because Victoria Schwab is one of my top 5 favorite authors of all time, and I can't believe I have her new book that she's been working on for so long. Okay, that is it. That is the mid-year book Freakout Tag for 2020. I hope that this wasn't too late for all of you. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please let me know down in the comments below what your favorite book has been that you've read so far in 2020. If you can't choose one, I understand. I can't choose one either, so tell me a few of your favorite books that you've read in 2020. And be sure to check out Skillshare, link will be in the description below. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!